The Appalachian Mountains have always carried their own kind of legend. Vast stretches of wilderness where the trees swallow sound and the shadows stretch a little too far. Being out there alone can feel either peaceful or punishing, depending on the night. But when the silence breaks in all the wrong ways, when you begin to wonder if the woods themselves have a pulse, solitude quickly becomes something far darker. Tonight, I'm sharing 3 true and terrifying stories about what it means to be completely alone in the Appalachians. Each one begins with ordinary calm and ends with something no one has ever been able to explain. I was 19, and for the first time in years, my parents were away for the weekend. They'd gone 2 states over for a family wedding I conveniently forgot to attend. The truth? I just wanted the house, buried deep in the Appalachian hills, entirely to myself. Ours wasn't an easy place to get to. You had to drive past the last scrap of pavement, cross 2 rickety bridges, then crawl your way up a gravel incline with switchbacks sharp enough to spill your coffee. Nobody stumbled across our house by accident. It was us, the clearing, and the woods. That's it. That first night was bliss. Pizza in the oven, blankets on the couch, late-night television reruns humming in the background. Around 3 a.m., I finally dozed off, flickering screen light dancing across the room when a sharp sound cut in. Tap, 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 almost like fingernails against glass. I froze, eyes half open. Tried to tell myself it was just a branch. Then came the second series. Tap, tap, long pause, tap again. Same rhythm, same window. I sat up, muted the television, and held my breath. Silence. No wind. No frogs. Just that eerie emptiness you never notice until you're searching for sound. I flicked on the porch light yard empty. I checked every lock, every window, every door, then retreated to my bedroom with a flashlight clutched like a weapon. The second night, everything got worse. Instead of taps from outside, it came from underneath. Thud. Slow, deliberate bumps moving under my floorboards. My stomach dropped. The house had no basement, just a crawl space about 3 feet deep with an old hatch sealed by padlock. I went out back with my flashlight, trying to convince myself it was a raccoon, or worse, a big opossum. But when I reached the hatch, dread hit me fast. The padlock was hanging loose, still hooked onto the latch, but the bolt was missing. It hadn't broken, it had been removed, like someone had undone it with steady hands and then left the lock dangling for me to find. That night, every single window in the house began tapping in sequence. Living room, kitchen, bathroom, laundry room, as though invisible hands were circling, knocking just enough to say, "We know you're inside." I pushed my dresser in front of my bedroom door, gripped a kitchen knife until my hands went numb, and waited. When something finally knocked directly on my bedroom window, 4 slow, deliberate bangs, I thought my heart was going to stop. By daylight, the taps were gone, but pressed faintly against the glass on every window were oily smudge marks. Face height. Just the clear sign that something, or someone, had been peering in all night. I left that morning, didn't even wait for my parents to return, and I've never slept in that living room again. My uncle owned a hunting cabin far up in the ridges. He used to take my dad and cousins there every fall. But one winter, I asked if I could use it alone, no phone signal, no neighbors, no tech. Just me, seeing if I could handle being cut off for a full week. In daylight, the place seemed harmless. A sagging porch, stacked firewood, the restless groan of boards shifting with age. I made chili on the stove, read a bit, left boots by the door. By night, the silence was so thick it felt like the woods were holding their breath. On the second night, I heard the porch creak beneath deliberate weight, a single step. The boards wailed in that distinct tone they only made when someone put full pressure on them. My pulse spiked. I knew that sound. You couldn't sneak across that porch, it betrayed everyone. I pulled back the curtain. Nothing. Just moonlight on the chair, wood stacked neatly. I told myself it was the cold making the porch flex. But then came a second creak. Heavier, shifting, closer. By reflex, I yanked the door open, empty space. But when I reached up to double-check the lock, the deadbolt was turned halfway, stuck between locked and unlocked, and I know I hadn't left it like that. Sleep refused to come. Around midnight, the scraping began, the drag of metal across wood. Slow, measured. It started along one wall, inched its way to the window, then crawled along to the next corner, enclosing the cabin in sound. When my flashlight beam cut across the yard, there was nothing. No raccoon, no shadowy figure, but that scraping only grew louder until it stopped in sudden silence at the back door. Then 3 knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I sat paralyzed in the kitchen with the flashlight aimed straight at that door. Too afraid to blink, too afraid to move. Finally, dawn stained the sky gray. Against every instinct, I forced myself outside, boots crunching into the dirt. That's when I saw them. Dozens of footprints circling the cabin. Not random, wandering, not a hunter who'd stumbled too close. Perfect spirals, carved loops all around the property. Whoever it was had...
The story of the centurion is not one of sudden invention, but of steady refinement. As Rome expanded from a modest Italian republic into a Mediterranean empire, the centurion's role evolved with every conquest, adapting to the demands of new enemies, harsher terrains, and the growing ambitions of Roman leaders. During the campaigns of Gaius Julius Caesar, the centurion became both symbol and backbone of Rome's unstoppable legions. In the bitter struggle against Vercingetorix at Alesia in 52 BCE, centurions were the glue that held the vast encirclement together. Caesar himself recorded in his Commentari de Bello Gallico how these officers held firm under relentless Gallic assaults, rallying their men when fortifications trembled, and charging into the thickest fighting where discipline threatened to collapse. To be a centurion in Caesar's legions was to embody not just courage, but resilience, the unyielding will of Rome pressed into human form. With the rise of Augustus, the first emperor, the centurion's authority only deepened. Augustus's sweeping military reforms created a professional standing army, transforming the legions into a permanent force stationed across the empire. In this new order, the centurion became the daily enforcer of imperial discipline. He was no longer merely the hero of the battlefield. He was the trainer, the inspector, the moral guardian of his century. The Vitus, the vine staff, became his emblem, a symbol of authority that could strike fear into the lazy or careless soldier. A lash of the vine was as dreaded as the enemy's sword, for it carried not personal malice, but the full weight of Roman disciplina. Yet the centurion's life was not one of prestige alone. He led from the very front, his transverse crest a target for enemy spears and arrows. At Teutoburg Forest in 9 CE, when 3 Roman legions were ambushed and annihilated by Arminius and his Germanic allies, it was the centurions who fought to the bitter end, often sacrificing themselves to buy moments of order in a storm of chaos. Tacitus would later describe such men as pillars of the state, men whose deaths were measured not in numbers, but in the collapse of Roman confidence in the region. In the Dacian Wars under Trajan, centurions again distinguished themselves as the first to storm enemy ramparts, carrying ladders under a hail of arrows, shouting commands even as wounds tore through their armor. For their bravery, some won double pay or decorations, but more often they won only scars and graves in foreign soil. To their men, the centurions were both protectors and executioners. They were expected to punish deserters, enforce decimation when ordered, and yet also shield their soldiers from reckless commanders. This duality was their burden, to be feared and respected in equal measure, to embody both the iron hand of Rome and the beating heart of the legion. Their glory was undeniable, their names etched in stone, their promotions celebrated, their loyalty rewarded with wealth or citizenship. But within that glory lay a fragile truth, for the centurion was not invincible. His honor, his loyalty, his discipline, these were his true armor. And if even a single crack appeared, if judgment faltered or loyalty wavered, the very system he embodied could turn against him. For the centurion, triumph and destruction walked side by side. His rise to glory was inseparable from the burden of perfection. And in Rome, perfection was demanded, yet never guaranteed. Behind the gleaming armor and the commanding voice, the centurion was still a man, vulnerable to the same fears, temptations, and weaknesses as the legionaries he led. His transverse crest might have marked him as an officer, but beneath the helmet was flesh, bone, and a mind that carried the crushing weight of responsibility. Rome demanded perfection, yet no man could ever truly